welcome, and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. For many of you who have been following us for the last 7 years, you realize that this is a show where we're approaching midlife and beyond, and we want to find our most buoyant years, our most creative lifestyles being able to be expressed. Sometimes we find our physiologically selves, so to speak, kind of breaking down a little bit. We kind of get confused, depressed, probably just finding those particular things just aren't moving us forward. We want to know what we can do about it. Pshaw, they say. What do you mean? In a midlife, do we approach things such as menopause for women, andropause for men? What is it we can do that we can be more self-sustaining? We can actually be more creative and more energetic. On the program today, we're going to be talking with Miss Susun Weed. That's right. She's a wonderful herbalist who's going to be talking with us what we can do right now to make these things a lot better for ourselves. I'd like to welcome to the program today our guest, Susun Weed. Susun, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Green blessings, Daniel. I'm so glad to be with you.
You bet. Now, it's really kind of an exciting thing, and it's interesting because we've actually covered this topic many, many times here on the program. And a lot of times when people are approaching midlife and the depletion of hormones begin to happen, they find that they become confused about, why have I felt like I've kind of lost control of my life a little bit?
Well, let me take a slight issue with the idea that there's a depletion of hormones at midlife. You know, and I think that what you are doing with your show is so important, which is basically summed up in what my mother used to say, which was, act your age, look your age. And, you know...
We don't want to do that at this age, do we?
Baby boomers, we just do not plan to look our age or act our age. Thank you very much. We are going to go forward vibrant, juicy, interested, keen, and aware. Mm-hmm. That's our goal, right? So starting by saying, when we get to the time of our life when we become hormone deficient, already is acting our age. Oh, my. Well, of course we don't become hormone deficient. What a silly thing. Just as we change our hormonal status at puberty, women also change their hormonal status at menopause. And that is an absolute given. Every woman and every man is going to go through puberty if you live long enough. Mm-hmm. And every woman is going to go through menopause. Does a man go through a similar change to menopause called andropause? I'm sorry, absolutely not. Definitely not. Because a man retains his fertility and his ability to engender children until how old? Mm-hmm. 80s? We have dads in their 80s. We have the occasional dad in his 90s. So, no, men never go through something that is the equivalent of menopause. Menopause is a complete and profound metamorphosis that takes a woman and changes her from a caterpillar into a butterfly. It puts her face-to-face with her own mortality. She leaves behind the second stage of her life, mother, whether she's been a biological mother or not, and enters the crown of her life, which is the crone. As these hormones change in a woman, and they don't deplete, they change. As a matter of fact, menopause is characterized by hormone levels 60 to 70 times greater than any other time during her life. Mm. So it's the exact opposite of a depletion. It's an enrichment. Women are capable of making 30 different types of estrogen. In utero, we all begin life as little girls, don't we? Mm-hmm. We all come with standard equipment, a uterus, ovaries, and a clitoris. If we have XX. Then we use the estrogen in the uterus, in the amniotic fluid, to make those our primary sexual characteristics. If we have XY, then we're not able to really utilize the estrogen there in the amniotic fluid, and those organs gradually change. The clitoris lengthens and becomes a penis. The ovaries come down, awaiting their descent into testes, and the uterus rolls underneath the bladder and becomes the prostate.
Oh.
Women at about halfway through the pregnancy start producing 29 of the 30 estrogens they will make. Those 29 estrogens have been made in my body since this body was half-baked in the uterus and will be in my body every day of my life until the day I die. Because I'm a woman, and that means I make estrogen. I make 29 kinds of estrogen every single day of my life. That doesn't change. That's called baseline estrogen. At puberty, you, as a man, start making a lot more testosterone. The prostate reaches its final size. It's been growing all this while in a man. And you start making a lot of testosterone, which enables you to start maturing sperm. At this point, the prostate goes into suspended animation. It doesn't grow. It doesn't exchange any cells. In other words, it doesn't do cellular turnover and renewal like everything else in the body. It just kind of goes into this, kind of into a cave, you know? The way men often like to solve problems by going off by themselves into a cave. And so the prostate is really the image of that, because it does this at puberty. It closes its doors, and it says, I'm not really needed now. For the woman, puberty causes the follicles present in the ovaries to begin to start developing. And every month, switching from one side to the other, in one ovary, about a dozen follicles start getting ready for what I call the Miss Egg contest. Only one of them is going to win the Miss Egg contest. And she is going to punch a hole in the ovary, escape from the ovary, find the egg tube, slither down that, and hope to meet Prince Charming. And if she meets Prince Charming, well, then we're pregnant. Now, as this egg matures, a variety of things are happening in the body. One of the key hormones here in causing the follicles to develop is a hormone called estradiol or estradiol. And this is such a powerful estrogen that many times we get kind of lulled into thinking that it is estrogen. Estradiol is to breast cancer as kerosene is to fire.
Oh.
Now, kerosene doesn't cause fire, right?
No, of course not.
But if there's a spark, you're going to get a conflagration, not just a fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So estradiol, which is only made right around ovulation for 24 to 36 hours per month, is nonetheless the driving engine of reproduction in women. At the age of 20, in America, a white woman's risk of being diagnosed with breast cancer is about 1 in 20,000. She can afford to make estradiol, be fertile. Wonderful. By the age of 40, that same white woman's risk has become 1 in 400. By the age of 50, it's 1 in 50. And by the age of 60, it's 1 in 25.
My goodness.
So what would a smart woman do sometime between the ages of 40 and 60? She'd stop making this lethal hormone, wouldn't she?
It would only be reasonable.
It would only be reasonable. That's what we call menopause.
Listening to what you're describing here is quite fascinating, because people who think of someone who looks into herbal aroma therapies, so to speak. And I'm not saying herbal aromatherapies is a specific area, but
okay, I don't actually use or advise people to ever use aromatherapy or essential oils, just to be clear.
No, I know, I knew I was kind of crossing a threshold here, but basically the whole idea, right? The whole idea is that when you think of that, you think basically, and this is could be a general perception, not everyone's perception, is, well, geez, that seems so hippie-ish. What would somebody know, for instance, about real medicine? What would somebody know about real physiology? What would somebody like that really be able to tell me that a doctor can't tell me with precise professionalism? Something that would actually make me feel convinced that if I go this direction, it would actually be beneficial for improving my health, especially when it comes to midlife. But the funny thing is, when you take a look at the messages that are going on out there, it almost seems that we can't escape sometimes this particular aging process, which for a lot of people basically hear, oh, God, I'm just kind of breaking down and there's nothing I can do about it, but it seems to me that at least pharmacopoeia can help me sort of sustain what seems to be a lifestyle that I can feel happy about. And then I hear you describing everything that you just have, and I think to myself, you don't hear a whole lot of doctors talking to people like that. And that's what makes it all so fascinating, that you really seem to have an up and up on what's really going on when it comes to how the human body functions, how it grows, how it develops. And I probably misnomed when I said depletion. Not that I meant to, but that's the message that we hear. It's depletion. It's like it's inevitable.
Yes. Yeah, so I think it's very important that we understand our bodies, because I think, Daniel, that you and I agree that knowledge is the basis of power, especially as it comes to health.
Right.
And just very, very briefly, in my book, Healing Wise, I talk about the three traditions of healing: the scientific tradition, which measures and fixes; the heroic tradition, which cleanses the toxins; and the wise woman tradition, which nourishes the whole unique being. In my book, New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, I not only offer the kind of information that I'm offering here, I talk about how hot flashes are actually a movement of kundalini through the body, and what hot flashes actually do to improve our health, and especially to help prevent heart attacks, and why a woman needs and wants to have hot flashes during menopause. In fact, I work with what I call the 6 steps of healing, which is, first of all, do nothing, then collect information, which is what you're doing and we're doing here, and hopefully the listeners are doing, then engage the energy, nourish and tonify, stimulate and sedate, use drugs, and then break and enter, go to high-tech medicine, because every single one of those is a form of healing available to us, useful to us, and effective in its place. We want to start first with doing nothing. So our first take on menopause and midlife for men is do nothing. Don't get all excited about it. Just say, what we might call awareness meditation or serenity medicine, saying, yes, indeed, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see a 20-year-old. Isn't that fascinating, how the skin changes as I've aged? Look at that. The cartilage in my chin and nose and ears is growing. The older I am, the bigger my chin and nose and ears. My goodness, look at that. I'm getting to have the face of an older person.
I think a lot of people just don't want to do that based on the messages that we continually hear. Like aging is some sort of a disease almost.
Almost. Instead of a fascinating journey.
Exactly.
And part of having it be a fascinating journey is what keeps us bubbling with life, because we don't split off from ourselves and find what's going on wrong. We find what's going on right. Mm-hmm. Now let's go back to the prostate, because remember that at puberty, the prostate went into its cave and said, you don't need me now. When a man gets to midlife, there is a midlife change for men in industrialized countries. This does not seem to happen in non-industrialized countries, and we haven't quite put our finger on what the difference is there. But the prostate wakes up at midlife, and it has accumulated cellular mutations because it's been asleep for 25 or 30 or 35 years. It nonetheless, like all cellular tissue, has been acted on by free radicals, oxidation, radiation, sunshine, all those things. And so this is the reason why we find 50% of 50-year-old men have prostate cancer, 60% of 60-year-old men, 70% of 70-year-old men, 80% of 80-year-old men, and 90% of 90-year-old men have prostate cancer, which means cellular changes in the prostate. In industrialized countries, the prostate starts to grow at midlife, and it is encapsulated. It has a kind of tough skin. Think of I hope you don't find this offensive, but it's the closest thing that I think most people know of, like the gizzard in a turkey. Oh. It's got this tough skin on the outside. The prostate has a skin like that. So when the prostate grows, it has only one place to grow, and that is in. And remember, it's gone below the bladder. So the prostate is shaped somewhat like a bagel, but with a smaller hole. And as it grows, that hole tightens up. And the tube that passes the urine out of the body goes through that hole. So as this happens, men start to get lower urinary tract symptoms. Like menopausal women, they start waking up in the middle of the night. Only for the man at midlife, he's waking up, going to the bathroom, feeling an urgency, and he's getting a couple of drops. He goes back to bed. An hour later, he wakes up. It's really urgent. He gets a little stream, but it dribbles out. Mm-hmm. He goes back to bed. He gets an hour and a half of sleep. He wakes up. He's really got to go now. He goes. He can't go. He tries everything he knows to go. He gets a couple of drops because you see the tubes being squeezed, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not connected to lack of testosterone. As a matter of fact, testosterone used to only be available in kind of unwieldy forms like self-injection. And when it was finally available in a dermally absorbable form, making it, really available to people, they wanted to see what the kind of benchmark for testosterone was, and they tested testosterone in about 250,000 American men. And what they found was that there was no correlation of any kind between the level of testosterone in the blood, the man's sexual potency, and his health. So they simply made up a baseline figure. And I call it equal opportunity hormone replacement. A woman will be told she's lacking in estrogen if she goes to an MD, and she should do something about that. If she goes to a naturopathic doctor, she's going to be told she's estrogen dominant and needs to use some progesterone, or that she needs to use bioidentical hormones, which the Feminist Women's Health Network calls New Age snake oil, and I completely agree with them. And the man is going to be told that he needs to take testosterone. Again, just where we started, because it was a very true statement that you said, that our culture says you get to a certain age, now you become deficient, and you have to prop yourself up with hormones. And what we know is that in non-industrialized countries, this simply isn't true. So let me make an educated guess here, because I'm certainly not seeing it among my students or my friends. I'm seeing great sexual activity and interest well into the 80s and 90s among both men and women. I'm seeing an active, pleasurable, non-painful lifestyle. I'm seeing a lot of intellectual interest, but I have to admit I hang with people who indulge in what we call physical culture, which I like far better than exercise, and who also indulge themselves in eating the best food they can get their hands on. And most of my students and nearly all of my friends drink Nourishing Herbal infusions. We've often talked about Nourishing Herbal infusions, you and I, Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell people that there's more information about those in New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, which does have a chapter on Andropause. And in my new book, which will be available June 21st, down there, The Wise Woman Way, Sexual and Reproductive Health for Men and Women, which includes a 50-page chapter on the prostate, as well as another separate chapter on lower urinary tract symptoms, a wide variety of ways that both men and women can not only help prevent problems, but if they have those problems, can help to reverse those problems using, as we've said, the simplest and least harmful remedies first, and working their way through those up to, if they need to use them, drugs and or surgery. And I talk about the side effects of those drugs, possible herbs that could be used instead of those drugs, the side effects of the surgeries, and what support we can get from complementary and integrative medicine if we do choose to go to surgery.
Now, Susan, you're talking about something that really hits a core issue, especially with men in the last 10 to 15 years, and that is prostate cancer. You know, all of a sudden, here's this new term, so to speak, that's on the horizon. And all of a sudden, it gets men thinking, well, wait a minute, you know, okay, breast cancer seems to be dominating women here. As you said, it's 1 in 20, I believe it was, by a particular age.
The risk changes according to how old you
sure
are.
Does. It sure does.
At age 60, it's about 1 in 25. At age 90, it's 1 in 8.
Right. And again, there's this inevitability that you didn't hear too much 30 years ago, even 20 years ago. You know, it was one of those anomalies that all of a sudden, you know, people go, well, okay, you know, it's happening, but it's so rare that I don't believe it's going to happen to me. Then all of a sudden it began to grow, and it became this weird sort of morphize, if you will, and we become concerned that, well, what do we do about it? And it seems as though we're being sort of, I guess, heralded like sheep, so to speak, to believe that this could actually happen. And there is only these particular steps that we can take to prevent it, or at least get rid of it, as you were talking about surgery, for instance. Now, here was one thing that I found that was really interesting a couple of years ago that I read about prostate cancer and how it was treated through surgery. They felt that men didn't live any longer, generally speaking, if they had surgery than if they just kind of let it go. And I found that's kind of interesting. Well, wait a minute. If you're not living any longer, if you have surgery versus if you don't, what's the point? So what's going on here with the thinking?
I quote, "No one knows which treatment option is the best.
Right.
Radical prostatectomy, radiation therapy, and watchful waiting are all acceptable. There is no clear-cut evidence for the superiority of any one of them." So it somewhat depends on the personality of the man. You know, for some men, watchful waiting is interesting. My friend Ralph Blum has been watching his prostate cancer for about 15 years and writing a book about it.
15 years. See, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You get the feeling that cancer is just going to take you right out of the ball game in the first year if you're lucky.
Right, but that's certainly, you know, not what is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So there's a great many things, of course, that we can do to protect the prostate and to prevent prostate cancer, as well as things that we can do if we feel that we need to, really jump in there and do it. And again, my forthcoming book down there, The Wise Woman Way, Sexual and Reproductive Health for Men and Women, is what I'm referencing here. Your best bets for protecting your prostate from cancer that's going to kill you is to eat 4 servings of cooked cabbage family plants per week. That's broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, turnips, kale, collards, cabbage as well. to eat lycopene from cooked tomatoes. It's really important to get that lycopene from cooked foods, not from raw foods, because the raw foods really don't provide any kind of protection. The carotenes are not really available unless the tomatoes and the leafy greens and so on have been cooked.
Now hold on just a minute. It's interesting because you've got a raw food movement out there that suggests, don't cook so much. And you're saying just the opposite. What's
I am
the difference?
saying just the opposite, and I have a YouTube that's available that anybody can watch called Raw versus Cooked, in which we have a, in studio, very polite, formal debate between one of the leading lights of the raw food movement. In fact, this is a woman who's a very good friend of mine, and we had planned to sell this as a money-making project, this video, and I wouldn't let it be released because I love this woman and admire this woman so much, and she makes such silly statements like when you cook food, you can smell the minerals in the air. Minerals, of course, are rocks, and they actually cannot be destroyed ever by heat, right? Anyhow, somebody got a copy of it and put it up on YouTube, and it's available there. After this debate, the raw versus cooked debate, my friend and I went to Brigitte's house to have a raw food dinner, and we're not talking, a plate of raw food set in front of us. We're talking about an elaborate 4 or 5 course, meal that was prepared, as I said, by one of the leading, raw food proponents in the United States. And the friend who is with me is a diabetic, and as is her standard practice, she wasn't doing it because we were eating raw food meals. She does it because this is what she does. Before any meal, she takes her blood sugar. She wants to see what her blood sugar is, so that she can then take another blood sugar reading after the meal and see how much insulin she needs.
Ah.
Well, she took her blood sugar reading. She ate this meal. She waited the regular amount of time. She took another blood sugar reading, and it was exactly the same as before the meal. What does that say to you, Daniel?
Well, it says to me that basically your thinking is kind of balanced in a way that just doesn't move you to the direction you think it is.
What it says to me is that there is no nutrition of any kind available from raw food, no matter how skillfully and artfully prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So, we really do need to cook these plants. Cabbage family plants especially are very hard on the thyroid when eaten raw. We've been talking about Nourishing Herbal infusion, drinking Nourishing Herbal infusion, especially nettle infusion. At least 2 quarts a week is another really excellent way to protect your prostate, and nettle is South America's leading anti-cancer herb. Omega-3 fatty acids, you've been hearing a lot about omega-3 fatty acids. We don't want to take them in capsules, however. We want to get them from eating oily fish, especially sardines and herring, which are very low on the chain. A can or 2 of sardines a week really is much better than any amount of pills. Also, walnuts are an excellent source of omega-3 fatty acids, and we know that walnuts certainly do help prevent heart disease, and leafy greens are another good source of omega-3 fatty acids. Organic meat and milk, if we're going to be eating meat and milk and we're concerned for our prostate, then make them organic. Physical activity, we've been talking about that. I talk about that every time I talk with you, and I know you talk about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Physical culture. Don't think of it as, oh gosh, I have to go to the gym, but think of it as, let me park 2 blocks away and walk. Let me go up the stairs or down the stairs. Let me take a child to the park and play with them. Get some physical culture going. Do some yoga. Do some Tai Chi. All right? Do something with your body. Selenium in pill form can be somewhat problematic for men. Certainly men with the lowest levels of selenium are 4 or 5 times more likely to have prostate cancer than those with the highest levels. And supplemental selenium can reduce risk, but only in those with a very, very poor diet. And, in fact, too much selenium is as bad as too little. The highest blood levels of selenium are associated with the highest levels and the highest risk of aggressive, deadly prostate cancer. So, again, I suggest selenium from foods rather than then from supplements, and do give you a list of selenium-rich foods that you can work with. Vitamin D from the sun. We're starting to see some problems with people with high supplementations. And sterols, which are natural hormone precursors found in plants, especially things like lentils, split peas, black-eyed peas, and red clover infusion.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, too, because you talk about how as we get older, especially in industrialized countries, we see a lot of sedentary behavior. You know, in fact, in the language, it's, well, you know, when it's time to retire, make sure that you get the nest egg that you need to basically sit around and don't worry about the rest of your life. And there's a problem right there. Now, here's an interesting thing is that, for instance, my wife's father, he's in his approaching late 70s. Anybody who's ever visited the Northwest, especially Mount St. Helens, I was with this man on this particular day when we went up to Mount St. Helens. There's a long stairway that takes you up to the side where you get to really view the mountain in its majesty. And I mean, this is a long, steep steeplechase, if you will, to go to the top of this stairway. I was pretty much out of breath a quarter of the way up. This guy goes running up the stairs, and of course, as I attributed it to her, I said, well, you know, look, I did all the driving. You know, I was pretty tired by the time I got to the mountain. But here this guy is basically scaling. He's almost running up these stairs. And it's like, come on, what's taking you so long, you know? And I'm like, this guy is in his 70s, and he just has this virility that is just unbelievable. And I think to myself, he must probably, you know, try to find ways to keep himself active and moving forward. And it was just so different because you couldn't even place a finger on the fact that he must have been this particular age. And you think to yourself, staying moving to me seems to be one of those things, staying moving forward anyway, that could help prevent a lot of things, it would seem, because it tells the body a different message than just sitting around out the pasture.
You are so right. My voice coach is 77 years old. Mm-hmm. When I was there yesterday, I said to him, you're sunburned. He said, I've been on the slopes all week. And not skiing, but teaching snowboarding to teenagers.
Oh, wow. Snowboarding to teenagers, imagine.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what a 77-year-old does. So, and again, yes, it does require some commitment. It requires a commitment to yourself, your health, your well-being, and your joy, that you may not exactly feel like getting up and doing something, but you do it anyhow because you know that if you do that, you're going to have a lot more years of feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
So drinking your Nourishing Herbal infusions certainly helps one feel like getting up and doing those things. And they provide a basic support which gives the body the nourishment it needs to continue making the hormones that it needs in the quantities that it needs. One of the real difficulties with supplementation, of course, is that with supplementation we're basically taking the same amount all the time. And the body, of course, as we know, is always changing. And there's I like a dance or a symphony of hormones going on within each individual person. And when we start taking just a set amount, it's like somebody coming in and blowing, you know, a blast on a siren while the symphony is trying to play. It's hard for the other instruments to hear each other. It's hard for things to be in order. So rather than looking outside of ourselves for ways to supplement hormones, we look at our activity level, which helps our bodies produce hormones, and the nutrition that we're getting. You know, one of the things that I find for women is that animal fat is so critical for a woman's health. A woman makes a lot of different hormones, and that's true all of her life. And all hormones made by both men and women are actually based on cholesterol. Did you ever play with Tinker Toys when you were a child, Daniel?
From time to time.
Okay, so you know what I mean when I talk about that circular, it's usually plain wood connector. Mm-hmm. And then there's rods that are usually colored of different lengths. That plain wood round connector is cholesterol. And depending on what rods we put in to that connector, what colors they are, what lengths they are, and how many of each we put in, that's what determines whether we have which of the 30 different estrogens, or whether we have testosterone or luteinizing hormone, or follicle-stimulating hormone, right? Progesterone, all of the different hormones, cortisone, thyroid hormones, the hormones made by the pineal and the pituitary, all of the different hormones, this hormonal orchestra, the basis of them all is cholesterol. This is why cholesterol is so critically important. For a woman, especially for a woman before the age of menopause who's looking to increase fertility, I suggest animal fat at every meal. And this really allows the body to be in the peak of health and the peak of fertility. Well, who wouldn't want to be in the peak of health and the peak of fertility, even if it's a woman who's after or during menopause, or if it's a man who is always going to be fertile? And so for all of us, animal fat at every meal. Now, that doesn't mean meat.
Mm-hmm.
We get animal fat from meat. We also get animal fat from fish, from full-fat dairy products, from eggs. So we have a lot of different choices. Butter is an animal fat, so we could have some butter on our toast in the morning, some cheese on our salad for lunch, and a piece of fish for dinner, and that would be animal fat at each meal.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that, I see so many women who've chosen restricted diets get to menopause, and suddenly their body starts screaming at them and says, you can't starve me this way anymore.
It's interesting because you say restrictive diets, and we have been, it seems, pigeonholed into confusion. Don't you find that interesting? That we get so many mixed messages. You can be online and you can see on the news there, well, a new study shows this, and it's like, this isn't any different than the same kind of nonsense that I've been reading, say, 20 years ago in the newspapers and magazines. You're at the checkout stand, you're watching the news, you break to a commercial, you might see this happening to you, so you might want to do this. And it gets to a point that you get so many mixed messages that the loudest, cleanest, most reasonable message leads you to do things that I think that unnaturally you wouldn't do.
Well, one of my bywords is that health has never come in a pill.
I agree, because, you take a look, for instance, and this was, and I'm sure you've heard the same kind of a story, from people who go and they deal with, for instance, plumbing or septic problems. Did you know that these things just pass right through the body? I mean, they don't even digest or absorb any of these things.
That's
but
right.
Yet we go and we do this as though it's the gospel, and that's what I mean about being sort of pigeonholed into making a choice through mixed messages that we normally and naturally just wouldn't make.
We are fed health care by fear, by the predominant medical system in our country. So rather than having the counsel of wise elders and an indigenous diet which provides plenty of all of these things, we get a whole lot of opinions from people. How wonderful that we live in a free country where people are free to express their opinions. It's marvelous. But most of us have not received an adequate education to be able to tell opinion from fact. So when someone says raw food is alive and the enzymes are important, we believe we're hearing a fact. Whereas, in fact, it's an opinion. So let me ask you this. If you took a cooked seed and a raw seed and buried them, which one would grow? The raw seed would grow, right?
Sure.
Which proves that it's not food.
Ah. That's a good way of looking at it.
Because food is designed to break down. Only the cooked seed is food, and it's eaten by microorganisms and small insects in the soil. if you wished to bring life to something, would you warm it?
I wouldn't think that I would.
You wouldn't think that warmth is something that helps something to be alive? I certainly think of warmth as something that makes things come to life. I was just visiting my brother, and he sells starts. He grows over 150 different kinds of heirloom tomatoes. And in order to get those seeds to start growing, he gives them bottom heat. Because heat is the source of life. Heat doesn't kill life, it engenders life. The fire is the most sacred of all human possessions. It is one of the few things that we have that the rest of life on this planet does not have. Fire. Magical. Its ability to transform our food allows us to live past midlife.
For those of you just joining us, we're talking with Susan Weed. We're talking about ways that when you approach midlife and you begin to feel and experience the symptoms of what it means to age, that you don't have to be thinking, well, I need to remedy or patch this, but sort of feel through that, and ways that you can support and actually move through in ways where you can have better virility, so to speak. Stamina, get that clear thinking going on, move forward. Now, you were talking about particular herbal infusions, earlier in the program that you would suggest that people should kind of put into their routine. Now, one of the things that I was really interested in is that you were talking about tomatoes earlier in the program, and I remember that there was a particular article, and this was, a good few years ago, that suggested for men to reduce the risk of prostate cancer, be sure that you kind of incorporate more tomatoes into your diet. And I thought to myself, well, I make one hell of a ragu sauce, so I guess I'm on the right course because I love that stuff. Spaghetti, for instance, and I thought, okay, I'm on the right track. I like this, and I enjoy drinking tomato juice from time to time. Is just sort of a nice meal, like a breakfast sometimes. It just kind of hits the spot. It does the trick, and it's just amazing that something so simple can actually, improve you on the risk of getting something like a prostate cancer as a man, anyway. And that's kind of a concern, rather than waiting and, oh, geez, I did all the wrong things, and now all of a sudden, I'm saddled with this, and now all of a sudden there's a message that says, well, either I do surgery or treatment or I don't. Either way, I'm going to live just as long, so it really doesn't matter.
In fact, 2 servings a week of tomatoes, cooked tomatoes, reduces risk by about 23%, 4 servings a week by 35%, and 10 servings a week by 45%. So
find a bartender and get a good Bloody Mary without the alcohol.
And if you really want to make the lycopene and other biochemicals available, you need to have some oil. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons why pizza is such a good prostate health food.
Wow, pizza.
Sure. You're going to get really well-cooked tomato sauce. There's going to be some cheese on there, so it'll be oily. Right? And then put some anchovies on it.
Ah.
And you have those omega-3 fatty acids. So you're really, doing a great thing for your prostate, hot or cold. Mm-hmm. Lycopene is not just found in cooked tomatoes, it's also in dried apricots, pink grapefruit, and watermelon. And interestingly, the lycopene is found in foods has been shown to prevent prostate cancer, to repair those damaged cells we were talking about, to shrink the prostate and any tumors in the prostate, and if there's active prostate cancer, to slow its spread. However, lycopene supplements have not been shown to do any of those things.
What are some other herbal infusions that a person should incorporate into their diets on a fairly regular basis?
Well, let me tell you what I do, and perhaps it would be something that might, work for others as well. I rotate through 5 different herbal infusions. So right now, I'm drinking nettle infusion. And nettle infusion is the herb of energy. As I said, it's considered to be a powerful cancer preventative. It also helps to give glossy skin and glossy hair and just in general a feeling of vibrancy. Yesterday, I had oat straw infusion. And oat straw, like oats, makes for flexible blood vessels, vigorous heart health, and it also frees up bound testosterone and really helps us remain juicy and actively sexual well into our second 50 years. The day before that, I had red clover infusion. Mm-hmm. I really love red clover infusion. It's the world's leading anti-cancer herb, and it probably has more positive, substantial evidence showing it to be capable of reversing early-stage cancer than just about any other herb. There are some herbs that are active in later-stage cancers, but they're fairly poisonous, and they need to be used with a lot of skill and wisdom, whereas red clover is actually grown for pregnant and lactating cows. So it's extremely safe herb. And anyone who just wants to get the edge on cancer, to include a quart of red clover infusion a week is a safe and simple way to do that. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, red clover carries a little repair kit that the immune system can use to repair damaged cells. So it's especially effective in helping to reduce and prevent prostate cancer and breast cancer. So I'm sure to have at least a quart of red clover infusion a week. Mm-hmm. The day before that, I had linden infusion. It's the blossoms of the linden tree. And there's a wonderful YouTube of me harvesting linden blossoms. You can just, I think, go to YouTube and ask for Susun weed. I have a lot of YouTubes there. They're a lot of fun. Most of them star my granddaughter. And you see her and I harvesting linden, actually at a local shopping mall, and lots of people coming by and asking us, what are we doing? And we're saying, well, this is one of the world's leading anti-flu and anti-cold remedies, as well as being cold and flu preventative. But more to the point for us over 50s, this is an herb that cuts down inflammation. It can have the C-reactive protein, which is a measure of inflammation in the blood vessels that is very strongly associated with heart attacks. So we could very rightly say that drinking a quart of linden infusion a week would cut down on our risk of heart attack and perhaps even halve our risk of heart attack. You know, there's never been a single study of any kind that shows that lowering cholesterol in women reduces their risk of heart attack or causes them to live longer. In fact, we see just the opposite. Once a woman is past 70, the higher her cholesterol, the longer she'll live. And remembering that cholesterol is a critical need for women, especially as they move into and through menopause. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be drinking comfrey leaf infusion. Mm-hmm. I always say to people, you need to remember comfrey leaf infusion. Why is that? Because comfrey contains special proteins that are used in the formation of short-term memory cells.
Oh.
Aha! Now, I'll tell you, I'm around a lot of live-in apprentices who come and live here with me who are in their 20s, and I'll tell you, they do the same thing that we old folks do. They walk into a room, they say, what did I come in here for? They kind of scratch their heads, they can't get it, and they turn and they go out of the room without whatever they came for. What's the difference? I've never seen one of them go, oh, my God, am I becoming senile?
Oh, no.
No, they're just like, oh, I can't figure it out, and off they go. So I have to tell you that kind of behavior and looking at somebody that you know and not being able to call up their name, it's just as common among 20-year-olds as it is among 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-olds. It's just that we kind of go, you know, it's like we get a kind of memory apnea. We stop breathing.
Sure.
So remember comfrey. I also say that comfrey only affects the health of the skin, the bones, the tendons, the ligaments, the respiratory tissues, the digestive system, and the reproductive system, as well, of course, as being good for your brain. Other than that, comfrey doesn't do much.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people have a little fear about comfrey, and that's certainly kind of promoted out there. And so there's just a couple of things. I mean, I could give you all the kind of scientific basis for why I drink comfrey, at least a quart of it on a weekly basis, and have for 30 years. But I will tell you that having done that, and often up to a gallon of comfrey leaf infusion, if I've had an injury, that to all tests, and I have not allowed them to take a piece of my liver, but to all other tests of my liver is doing absolutely great. One of my past apprentices is an MD who works in Southern California, and there are a great many other people there that come to her. And she's been watching their livers now for over a decade, and they're drinking at least a quart of comfrey leaf infusion a week, and she has not seen any adverse liver changes of any kind. I'll also tell you that I have one child, a daughter, who's been pregnant once. So I have one child and one grandchild. And when my daughter was pregnant, with my blessing and my delight, she drank between half a gallon and a gallon of comfrey leaf infusion a week and continued to do so throughout the first year of her lactation. I certainly wouldn't risk people that near and that dear to me if I had the slightest hesitation about the health benefits of comfrey leaf infusion.
Fascinating stuff here. You know, your website is Susun, and that's S-U-S-U-N?
Susun. Keep the sun in Susun.
Keep the Susun in sun. SusunWeed.com, as I understand.
That's right.
Quite an extensive website. You know, you have YouTube videos there that are available for people to see demonstrations and become educated about how a lot of these things work. And what I really enjoy about having you on the program for our listeners out there is that you put a lot of common sense back into what it means to be alive. I mean, it's amazing when you erase the confusion about the messages that you hear out there, and you just simply empower people with information that really gets to be grassroots and common sense. They start making better decisions about their health and what they do with their lives.
That's what I've dedicated my life to, Daniel, is to empowering people so that they can make the best decisions. I give a full range of integrative, alternative, and orthodox options, including herbal, homeopathic, and energy medicines, all fully explained, along with, as you mentioned, the physiology and anatomy, so that you can choose the best for your own health. I recognize that every single one of us is unique, and what works for me may not be the very best choice for you. So my books, and the ones that we're mostly focusing on today, would be New Menopausal Years, The Wise Woman Way, Breast Cancer, ? Breast Health, ! The Wise Woman Way, and down there, The Wise Woman Way, Sexual and Reproductive Health for Men and Women. Come and visit us at
I like the title of that last one, Down There.
Down There. I did want it to be Down There for women and all the men they love, and my daughter said, "Oh, that sounds like you're so promiscuous." And I said, brothers, dads, uncles, cousins.
And as she gets older, she'll come to understand we don't have time for the nonsense to hide those things that we feel embarrassed about because we're older now. Let's go and have some fun with it. Who cares?
Yeah.
I remember, in fact, it was interesting. I was reading a book by, and a lot of people know the name of this guy, Dr. Deepak Chopra. This was years ago, and he said it was really interesting that he had read a study, and he even experienced this himself. He said most people said, without a doubt, the best times of their lives, the best years of their lives, when they were 60 and older.
I call them the
isn't that really
60s.
Exciting? Because I think you get to a point that you really know now what you wished you knew then, and you're old enough not to even give a damn about it anymore. So why not feel great, vibrant when it's happening? You know?
Give yourself the opportunity to feel great and vibrant. Keep listening to Beyond 50. Come to my website, SusunWeed.com. Drink your Nourishing Herbal infusions and indulge in physical culture. Move it.
Enjoy the action down there and the air up here as well. SUSUN. UN weed. Weed, just like it sounds, .com is the website. Susan, thank you for joining us here on the program. It's always a pleasure to have you.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Daniel.
You bet. And take care.
Green blessings. Bye-bye.
We also encourage you, the listeners out there, to visit us on our website. We'll have a hot link for Susan Weed right there on our website, or at least in our newsletter, which you should be signing up for. It's a free weekly e-newsletter where you can find out great information for you to use and pass on to others as well. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, live your day past halfway.